Okay.
Oh, okay, everyone. Hi, this is Kesha, and we are in a turning point for mankind. Um, this is our first meeting here in Houston in the aftermath of the passing of Mr. LaRouche, Lyndon LaRouche. And I know um, many people who may be watching this and also some in the audience may have just been have just heard about the recent passing of Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, and I wanted to first of all just to go back uh, and let you guys know what I want to do for this presentation is a number of us in the room here were participants as well as over 500 guests in a international conference of the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche movement founded by Helga Zepp LaRouche, the wife of Lyndon LaRouche. And this conference was a enormous undertaking for our organization because it's the first time that we had such a conference in almost 15 years. And there were people who were brought together from all international backgrounds, walks of life. And what I wanted to do today for the purposes of viewing audience, because the conference in itself was almost 8 hours plus long, including 3 panels, was to actually give some excerpts. We're going to go through about an hour's worth of excerpts, which, I'd like to get just in terms of a dialogue and discussion here some feedback and some thoughts, especially from people who were here, who attended the conference, and what your thoughts are. So this is not necessarily going to be a presentation. We'll stop in between some of the clips. I may say a few things about them because to put them into context, given the fact that I'm not showing the entire conference because that'll be a long time for us to sit here. But yeah, about 12 hours. But obviously, we held this conference at a moment where the mission of our organization and the future of our organization is strongly on the table with the passing of Mr. LaRouche and the fight to realize and continue his life's mission and his contributions to the progress and betterment of mankind. Before I get into that, I just wanted to again reiterate the beautiful, profound person who Lynn was and what he did to transform our lives and to inspire us all. And we put up, people can read the entirety of this memoriam, uh, which was first published after his death, which took place at then passed away at the age of 96. This took place on the birthday anniversary of Abraham Lincoln, which was on February 12th. But uh, the the statement that we first put out, I was really moved by the remarks which express the true embodiment of the commitment to the future which LaRouche represented. And so I just wanted to read a brief few remarks from that. First of all, the statement says, identifies who the real LaRouche is. Um, Lyndon LaRouche Jr., philosopher, scientist, poet, statesman, economist, died on Tuesday, February 12th at the age of 96. It was the birthday of Abraham Lincoln, and American President Lyndon LaRouche loved and celebrated in his writings. As the memoriam states, those who knew and loved Lyndon LaRouche know that humanity has suffered a great loss. And today we dedicate ourselves anew to bring to reality the big ideas for which history has will honor him. For those who did not know him or have only recently come to his ideas, there is no better guide to the unique personality than LaRouche himself. Here is how he spoke about life here on Earth in a speech at a conference in 1988 in the midst of a political prosecution similar in striking respects to that which we encounter against the American president in the United States today. And just to read the first paragraph to give you a sense of the commitment of Mr. LaRouche in his decades long fight for the progress of mankind and for the future of mankind. He states in there, this is in a speech entitled Food for Peace in 1988. He says, quote, "There is no part of society, no constituency which does not have the same interest. There is the people of no nation that has any different interest than that of any other nation in this matter. We're speaking of the future of hundreds of billions of unborn souls, without whose success our lives mean nothing. That is the common interest which unites each of us, each one of us, such that there is no distinction among any of us on this issue, on this cause, on this interest. If we fight so, if we fight with love of humanity, by thinking especially of those hundreds of billions of souls waiting to be born, and thinking also of those whose martyrdom and other sacrifice gave us what was our potential and our debt to them, respecting what we pass on to the future. And if and we think of ourselves as something lived for the as not as something lived for the moment to moment, but as a very small piece of experience, which a beginning and not much later an end. And think of our lives as things which are lived as for pleasure, and think of our lives not as things which are lived for pleasure in and of themselves, but as the opportunity to fulfill a purpose which is reflected in what we bequeath to those hundreds of billions of souls waiting to be born in their condition." End quote. So, what Lyndon LaRouche represented is the power of the First Corinthians and agape, the true love of mankind, an unconditional love of promoting the best creative potential for every single human being. And that brings me into the power of the conference that took place only 3 days after the passing of Mr. LaRouche, that brought together in a beautiful way people from many walks of life who expressed their unwavering commitment to fulfilling the life's work and the passion exhibited by Mr. LaRouche over so many years, and the work that is before us to ensure a society where, as the conference of the Schiller Institute was very appropriately titled, "Let us create a new, more human epic for mankind," in memoriam of Lyndon LaRouche, H. Jr., 1922 to 2019. So we're going to start with the clips now from the conference. And the first person we will hear from is who gave the keynote address was given by Jacques Cheminade, who is the leader of our French movement, international French movement. Uh, he gave the keynote address for this conference in respect to Mr. LaRouche and Mrs. LaRouche. And his keynote address was titled, Can Humanity Govern Itself to Guarantee Our Existence uh, as a Species? And he is the head of uh, the president of Solidarité et Progrès. So we will go ahead and start with the first clip, please. we're trying some. We're trying some new technical experiences here, so everybody be patient. we need to. We need to get Huawei involved.
Yes, let's get their campuses set up here, right?
so, so the next person you'll hear from, after hearing Jacques Cheminade, and if people thought about his ending remarks on the question of um, the pathfinders of the common LaRouche world and the importance of listening to what the Chinese are doing in the context of the LaRouche's method of the science of physical economy and increasing the creative power of the human mind. Um, what you will find in the next speaker, who is Professor John Gong of he's economics professor at the University of International and Business. Excuse me. Yeah. Well, if we could turn off the phones, please. It's a little distracting. I apologize. Yeah. Um, Sorry. Professor Gong is the professor of economics at the University of International and Business Studies at Beijing University, and he talks on further developing the importance of U.S.-China relations. So we will hear from him, and if you think about what Jacques Cheminade just said in terms of the importance of listening to the Chinese and the pathfinders of the coming LaRouche world, you will be extremely inspired by what he has to say. as you just heard Professor Gong there, um, I won't add too many comments in between because I want to be able to get a continuity here. But it is very interesting to think about at the present time that he gave that speech and we held our conference. You have going on in the United States, and we can talk further on this a little bit later on, a meeting between the heads of state and the development of U.S. China relations as it comes to trade. And there's been some remarkable developments in terms of the working together, and even the president himself in the context of technology transfer and actually working to improve the technological conditions of the United States. Referencing but not really stating the name of the the Chinese company Huawei, uh, has made the point that we should be in friendly competition to develop these new technologies for the use and advancement of nations working together. But I mean, it's similar to the idea of how do you actually share these technologies for improving the conditions of mankind. So he actually put out, President Trump did, put out a tweet to this effect, where the United States has to increase in 5G, 6G technologies. And we have to be thinking of what LaRouche, I wanted to comment also that you heard the model mentioned from the standpoint of the capitalist or free market view of U.S. economy. Well, our job is to instill the breakthroughs of Lyndon LaRouche's method of uh, his discoveries and his breakthroughs in the real science of physical economy based on the American system. And so this is what is going to drive the essence of LaRouche's call prior for the last many years now, for many years now, around the idea of a four powers solution and a new Bretton Woods solution, which would include the major powers of the United States, Russia, China, and India, including many others. So the next person you will hear from in this sequence from the first panel, this gets now into a very interesting change of events. This is a very powerful exchange that takes place here. Who you will see is Mr. Bill Binney, William Binney, who was the former technical director of the NSA and artificial. He's going to be talking about the role of artificial intelligence or the fakery of artificial intelligence, and more so, the question is what what is real truth? And so you will hear from him in just a second here because I think this is going to get at the core of questions that people are asking on the relationship of the ongoing coup in the United States against the current president of the United States, at which he takes on directly, and how this whole process came forth, and particularly why our organization has been fundamental to exposing that operation and our fight in that context over the years. So, as said, we want to go ahead and continue for the continuity. He might, yeah. um, so now that was quite an exchange there. First of all, for so people who were not at the conference, so um, it's remarkable the people that we have at our conferences, and the gentleman who spoke was very correct that it was I don't know if you call it a sense of humor that these two individuals ended up together on the same panel, but that was Mr. Nabinsky, who is the he is yeah yeah. Hold on one second. So he uh, So that was the ambassador and permanent representative to the Russian Federation to the United States, presented United Nations, excuse me, yeah, United Nations. Um, anyway, this is the individual, the gentleman who was sitting next to Mr. Benny is the Russian, uh, is part of the Russian Federation. So who he also gave a presentation from the Russian Council on the prospects of East West collaboration, the Russian Federation's view earlier. Now, before we go on, just let me check something here because we may have to change up the process of this presentation if it's not working appropriately. Uh, because, uh, yeah, it's not going to makes sense, unfortunately, if the people who are watching online can't hear any of the presentation. So if we take a quick intermission here and see if we can't, if there's any way we can fix that before we continue. If not, I will have to continue in a different way. So, yeah. So, so let me know, Mike, what you think.
Well, we can point the camera over
Okay.
so at least
But what about listening? Can they hear it with the camera pointing? Is that the point?
Yeah.
yeah,
can't
we
hear.
can at the same
Not
No.
necessarily, no.
Okay. So if you can come work
Sure.
that and
Work?
figure out if it works.
time. Yeah, it'll work.
Okay.
So you want to do that?
Um, sure.
Okay, so we'll point this over here. Point it like that. Okay. And we continue.
Now, what I understood is that the people said they weren't here because they weren't hearing
Yeah,
it
they
coming.
can't hear this clip.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not sure this one.
All right. Pardon the technical difficulties, everyone.
Okay, start up.
Okay, we're going to get started again. That was a brief intermission.
We're continuing in here, Evelyn. Evelyn?
Okay. Wait before you cut him on because that's a new segue. I should say where it's coming from. Okay. So I said I want to try to keep a continuity so we won't stop too much. But the next speaker that you're going to hear, we're now going into the second panel of the conference. And the second panel of the conference was titled The Aesthetic Education of Man for the Beauty of the Mind and Soul. And this is Bruce Director. As many of you heard in the first panel, Jacques Cheminade referenced Bruce Director, who has been a long-term collaborator of Mr. LaRouche for probably over 40 something years, on his uh, working on his scientific program. And so, anyway, as I said in the first panel, you heard the mention of Bruce by Jacques Cheminade, who he referenced Bruce's participation in a recently held class series on LaRouche's economic discoveries and his scientific discoveries that took place, which I encourage people to watch the entirety of if you weren't able to participate in. So you're going to hear a short excerpt from Bruce now in this second panel, which is titled On the LaRouche Conception of the Significance of Art for Science and Science for Art. Here, you'll see that Bruce makes clear that human creativity is the source of economic progress, which has been the basis of what we've been discussing so far. And I think it will really define LaRouche's method on what a real source of investigating intelligence and truth is, given the fact that you just heard William Binney, because Mr. LaRouche established the leading intelligence organization on the planet. You could probably say in the universe. So in the galaxy, yeah. So let's hear Bruce here.
Time faces the kind of difficulties that we face today. When they are united, you have the unlimited potential for development. No one can guide us better in this respect than Lyndon. He delved more deeply into the nature of creativity. He called it creativity per se, than anyone ever did before. He proved and elaborated how human creativity is the ultimate sum and substance of society, as reflected in physical economic progress and man's increasing mastery over nature. Mankind is demonstrably capable of creating new forms of physical existence and social organization that reflect the result in an increased power of human creativity. This power reflects the fundamental ontological characteristic of the universe as a whole, which is manifest in all its domains: life, non-life, and cognitive processes. LaRouche showed us this is expressed in the development of his concept of physical economy, or human economy, as distinct from financial, behaviorist, mechanistic concepts of economy. A real human economy, which is the only real economy. And he rightly called this the king of all sciences. Here, for LaRouche, human creativity is the source of economic progress, and it's measured in the increase in potential relative population density. And it is also the output of all economic process. He once drew a very beautiful chart of the machine tool principle, in which the input was the power of creativity and the output was a higher power of creativity. And that sums up real economics.
Nick.
Friedrich Schiller
Okay.
wrote
So this
in
is Megan.
1795, "It can be said that
Keep
every
going.
individual carries a pure ideal man in himself. It is the great task of his existence, during all his changes, to harmonize with this unchanging unity. Every human being is fundamentally distinguished from and set above all animals, all lower forms of life, in that every human child is born with the capacity for creative genius, to discover fundamentally new and true principles of the universe, or, as Einstein expressed it, to know God's thoughts. Therefore, genius is actually the natural condition of man. This is our fundamental species characteristic. However, if that's the case, then why are we in the situation we're in today, where the beliefs of the majority of our citizens and the system that they have gone along to get along with for more than 50 years, even while they disagreed with it, has led us down the path to our own destruction and has brought civilization itself to the brink of the abyss. Why has our own thinking failed us for so long? Is it the case that people were just in the dark about what was going on? Did they lack information? People today, as we discussed,
Know what happened? I don't know what happened.
Called it.
I'm not sure what
Yeah, call Bill Thingy.
happened.
One moment.
people were just in the dark about what was going on? Did they lack information? People today, as we discussed,
I don't know what happened there, but maybe
Oh.
it's a corrupted file. This file got corrupted, yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, we can.
I mean, it's corrupted on our website too?
But I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not correct because this is a special thing I had created. It
I see.
worked.
Let
It,
me, hold on, let me see if I can get it here.
hold on one second.
Let's see. But I don't know.
Oh, we're live.
That's me.
Yeah, sorry, wrong.
Yeah.
That's the wrong.
No, I didn't know.
That's the wrong one. Just a sec. Let's see if we get this.
Anyway, while we're waiting, Joanne's gonna answer the question.
The Chinese are blamed.
She's not in the room.
Uh-huh.
but while the objective circumstances were there, the moral possibility was wanting, and a great moment found a little people. What we lack today is not information, it's not the objective circumstances for change, but the emotional capacity to respond and realize that change. Now, this means that we must awaken within our fellow citizens an inner force to change, to pull humanity back from the abyss. We must make our fellow citizens better people. And we have to change today's society from a degenerate one, which has tolerated and perpetuated such injustices for so long, into a society which is moral, just, and good.
Okay. So if you stop right there for a second.
This is a question.
What we're going to do here, because I have a number of additional clips, but due to the technical difficulty and the time, and I want to try to get to some marching orders and other discussion, is the last clip here you're going to hear is from Mr. LaRouche. I'm actually skipping the entire third panel. I encourage people to go and watch the entire proceeding of the conference because it is now available on the LaRouche PAC website, and you'll be able to access that there. But I think, the third panel, just so people will know, the title of the panel was on the question of the future of space exploration, frontiers of space. And what I wanted to do is play the excerpt from Mr. LaRouche that really encapsulates the beauty and the purpose by which this conference must carry forth Mr. LaRouche's ideas. And he himself sort of speaks to the conference as he, in his own way, talks about the pathway to a more human epic of mankind. And this leads into I was fortunate enough to be able and privileged, honored to be able to be asked to speak on the third panel, which you won't be able to hear that today, but just continuing on this question of fulfilling mankind's destiny in the universe and what our mission to the progress of mankind is. So after this short excerpt from Mr. LaRouche, we will stop there with that portion of the discussion, and then we can go on from there. So go ahead.
Says Mr. LaRouche, I am a 21-year-old single mother and also a student at the university halfway through my program of studies. I've been reading your work for approximately 3 years, and I see no other ideas or projects that will get off the inclined plane on which we find ourselves, and which unfortunately appears to be endless. My question to you is this: what do we do to transmit to the majority of the world's youth who only live in the present and do so very badly the idea that they have a concrete, real, and effective future based only on cultivating the creative abilities of their minds? Thank you.
I think fairly simply after what I've said in this direction really today is that let's take the space program. We need to get at the heart of these matters in an exemplary way, and an exemplary way should also be a highly practical way. I think the objective, because it involves a concept of a change in the image of what man is. When you go to constant acceleration as a required modality in flight of a human being from one planet to another, you're operating in a completely new kind of domain, the domain of the relativistic relations. Relativistic transport. And this is a great challenge, because you have to think about when you're getting out of a one gravity situation on Earth into this kind of artificial gravity. You are in a relativistic environment. Your definition, your terms of thinking about the same old things you knew before are now presented in a new way. The human race eventually has to live in the universe. We have to live in the solar system. We have to live in the galaxy in the longer term. We have to face the challenges that represents. We have to see, you have to think like an immortal person. That is to think in such terms that you are thinking about mankind in the distant future. And you're thinking about your place in relationship to mankind in the distant future and even distant planets. Because you're looking for something in yourself which has permanent value. We're all mortal, we're born and we die. But we're not animals. We're creatively thinking creatures. And the meaning of our life does not lie in our biological existence as such. It lies in the meaning for humanity before us and after us, in what our lives have contributed to the existence of humanity as a whole. We have to see ourselves as human in that way. And therefore, the best way, practical way, is always to look ahead. Look as far ahead as you can look into the future, and see what it is that you must do for the future, so that your hand is at the tiller long after you're dead, in that way. But obviously, if you're going to chart a course, you have to chart a good choice of course. So pick one. Pick a destiny. Pick a destiny 2 generations, 3 generations, 4 generations before your life today. Try to reach that far. Try to make something that you do something that contributes to the future of humanity. Find your identity in the future of humanity after death. Commit the kind of acts and kind of development that mean that. And act accordingly. Because that is the secret of true happiness. That is the pursuit of happiness as understood by Leibniz, as recorded in his second reply to Locke, which became the cornerstone of our Constitution
to first the Declaration of Independence, where it is the meaning of our existence as a nation, and was reflected again in the preamble of the Constitution in its own way. We have to be immortal. We have to be immortal by assuming immortal responsibilities. Reach beyond our own life to what we can do now, which will touch in a beneficial way generations of people after your day. In that way, you know you're immortal. If you think like that, you know you are immortal. If you can act like that, you do even better.
Now that's what P. Diddy be singing in his song.
All right. Okay.
That was in the second bell.
Yeah, he does, P. Diddy.
So, oh goodness. So I want to end with that. I mean, there's a lot more, but in with that as that part of the segment, because I mean, you really get a sense from there that what LaRouche just stated was the basis of all of his fundamental scientific and all of his fundamental discoveries, and also the basis of his method in terms of all of his fundamental discoveries, and the basis of his thought process in terms of why it is that LaRouche represented something unique in the world, in the universe, and that unique representation of the difference between man and animal and the creative power of the human mind was not just some other political stance, but this is why LaRouche was seen as an enemy to the establishment figure, because they wanted you to believe that you had no power, that your mind has no relevance in society, that the creative power of the human mind is non-existent, that it's about people's beliefs and people's emotional states, or it's about that there's no such thing as truth. And for the commitment of Lent's life was dedicated to the Platonic idea of the creative power of the human mind as being able to advance society forward, contrary to what you see going on right now, which we didn't get a chance to get to, but the basis of one of this speeches that was done on the third panel, and also what I presented, was really taking on this question of what we're facing today in the bestialization of the society versus the economic, technological progress through the creative aspects of the human mind, which is this new Green Deal, this green agenda. And I wanted to bring that up because this is something in the wake of the passing of Mr. LaRouche and his commitment to identifying the difference between the beast and the human creative potential is what we have to take on, because this is not just what you're seeing right now with this new Green Deal, the anti-human, anti-scientific development coming from people like Ocasio-Cortez, but she's just she's just a small figure in that. I mean, it gets to the question of the role of the British Empire, who LaRouche has been a public enemy number one to, who they've seen as public enemy number one, because of the fact that he has been going after this for all of his life, going after this operation that stands in the way of human progress. And this is something that we are fully geared up toward defeating and bringing down once and for all. If you want to realize LaRouche's life work and vision, then you have to shut down the enemy apparatus that has been at play that wants to actually take away the potential for the future of acting, as Len said on many occasions here, for those future generations, for those unborn souls, because the policies that are being acted on right now through the Wall Street monetary system, through the environmentalist green agenda, and the ongoing policies of anti-progress, anti-growth, is complete antithesis and contrary in every way to what Lyndon LaRouche and our organization has stood for and fought for. But I can tell you one thing, this is what scares the enemy, because the power of the ideas that we represent, as many of you know who have worked with Mr. LaRouche and been in association for decades now, and many people sitting in this room know that, look, the enemy, after Mr. LaRouche passed, had already thought, this is okay, this is it. You know, there's not going to, it can't sustain. But unlike any other organization that has been in existence that has been established and has failed, the power of what Mr. LaRouche has built in terms of a movement of leaders committed to the truth seeking of this idea of what differs man from animals is what is going to continue to build and grow an even greater, powerful, and bigger movement. And we're already seeing the existence of that. And look, as Bill Binney said in his remarks, you see the enemy, they have nothing to stand on. I can tell you, it's not just going to be that they're not going to succeed in their operations for a coup against the current President Trump of the United States, but we're going to finish this coup and this operation, this apparatus off by making sure that they will never be able to do what they're doing again, in particular by what we're doing and what we're going to be calling each and every one of you to escalate your efforts in this fight of the exoneration of Lyndon LaRouche's name from by making sure that this evil apparatus is stopped once and for all. And for people who have not already signed, I know we've gone through this a number of times. I'm not going to go through it here, but, you know, in terms of the background. But when you think about what Lyndon LaRouche has committed his life to and what he founded this organization, the ideas he founded this organization upon, we have to fulfill a commitment to continuing to push those ideas forward, but by making sure that, as we put out just a few weeks ago, and it's now more important than ever as we continue the battle to shut down this witch hunt and coup in the United States, and understanding the history and the pedigree to which it has had a devastating effect even on our organization, to railroad Mr. LaRouche and associates into prison before. But the idea is not just to vindicate or exonerate LaRouche's name because he was innocent, which he was and still is, but the idea is that we have to free and exonerate mankind, to free mankind to be able to carry forth with these ideas that the enemy would want to stop at all costs. So if you have not seen or signed the exoneration petition, and this is not just a petition to look nice and for people to say they put their names on. Think about this. If the current president of the United States, Trump, were to exonerate and or pardon or some combination of both Lyndon LaRouche, to put the truth out on this whole criminal apparatus being led by the British and their underlings like Robert Mueller, who we would define as the amoral legal assassin, and the role that they've played in the devastation of the United States, not just in the past 2 years, but for the last 50 years plus, then we will be winning the victory, winning the battle for unifying the nation and mankind toward the progress of the future of mankind. So just so you know, one of the things that we will be doing and what we established coming out of this conference, which I think people will be extremely excited about, our long-term contacts, maybe our enemies won't be so excited about it, is that we're bigger and stronger than ever. We now have establishment of a strong executive leadership core in the LaRouche movement right now. And that leadership core is going to be immediately extended to you all here, people watching this, and everybody who wants to commit their lives and commit to this mission and this fight. So I'll tell you one exciting thing that we're going to be relaunching, which I know people have been waiting on this for a while, is relaunching our publication of the Hamiltonian, which was a newsletter that we started circulating for a short period of time, and had a powerful effect, but we are now going to start relaunching that newsletter. And I think everyone here and anybody watching who can get access to these newsletters, they're going to the printer on first one is going to the printer on Monday, and will be printed and out in a few days. But it's going to include a lead on the strategic development by Mrs. LaRouche. In some of this material you can find, it will include the full exoneration and the history of Mr. LaRouche in this context, and a 4-page obituary. It's going to be a 4-page open back forth. It would include the official obituary written by Dennis Speed of Mr. LaRouche, not the crap that the New York Times and others put out, which I'll say something on that in a second. So those are the 3 major things that this one is going to include, which will really freak the enemy out, because we have to make sure we get this out far and wide. And as a call for action, I would say, if people have not, just in terms of being able to get the true LaRouche out there, the ideas of Lyndon LaRouche, who he really is, not what the British establishment wants you to know or believe about him. We have to be the ones to get this material, the truth about LaRouche out there. And one of the things I would encourage people to do, if you haven't already done it, is to look at the beautiful presentation, which also goes through some of the conference, but it's 37 minutes that Matt Ogden did on the LaRouche PAC website. And one of the things that he emphasizes there is, and something that I encourage each and every one of you to think about doing, is letters to the editor being written to put forth both the exoneration of Mr. LaRouche, the call for that, but also getting the truth about who the real LaRouche is out to the various newspapers, taking the official obituary that has been put forth, and really Lynn's contributions and his impact on your life. I think we want to have, we're going to be talking about more people getting involved in this at all different types of levels. So you should think about that, people who are watching or people here who have contacts, or one of the things that was done recently is that there was a powerful letter that was written by a collaborator of Mr. LaRouche in Baltimore to the Baltimore Sun. And this was after the fact that the Baltimore Sun had published the lying, scathing, crazy obituary that had nothing to do with Mr. LaRouche. It was just, this is how the fake media works. They don't have any basis of truth. But what they did do is, with a back and forth from one of Mr. LaRouche's collaborators over there, they ran almost a 2-page plus long obituary, editorial of combating or refuting the editorial that had been put in by the Washington Post and other media. So
who was that?
that was who was
Doug Mallouk.
Doug, it was Doug Mallouk, sorry, in the Baltimore Sun. So that gives you a sense right now that our fight is just beginning. I know we had some technical difficulties here, but I think the idea of what our mission is and what our responsibilities are very clear. And I wanted to just stop there because, one, I know all of us in here, except for maybe a couple people, were at the conference. People may have thoughts on it. People may have thoughts on how they're thinking about proceeding and moving forward. So
What about the 4 laws?
what about it?
When are we gonna bring that to?
Well, we're definitely going to be doing more intelligence on the four laws and a material that's going to come out. That was the question, if we're going to reprint the 4 laws pamphlet. That's going to be also a part of, the next installments of our Hamiltonian.
That's gonna be upgraded, because is it gonna be the same words continuously? Is there new, like, ABCs to it, or?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, upgrading.
You have to let people know what that is, because a lot of people may want to be interested, but we don't understand it. And you might want to put it in average, everyday people's terms. We don't have to be a professor to understand what is being said. Because it's very, I'm serious.
Everyday
You
people.
have to do it like that, because a lot of people may not have those college degrees. Although some of us do, and some of us don't.
It's a handicap.
I know you're not talking about you,
It may be a
because
handicap, but if you're able to take, everybody wasn't able to get scholarships and Pell Grants.
I'm saying that having a college degree is a handicap.
Oh, yeah.
Having a kid.
I came to loan for my daughter, and she's over there cutting ham and beef at a restaurant. I said, girl, all this money I gotta pay back.
So I'm saying. But
I'm real heated.
But no, I mean, this is what we need. You're right. I mean, as far as people have to take one more responsibility to do the work, to actually read and study and immerse yourself in these ideas. And that's easier said than done in this collapsing economy, because this is not just nice academic work we're talking about here. It's absolutely essential for moving the economy and mankind forward. It's not if you have a little bit of spare time, you want to read some nice ideas, but it's essential for making sure that we can actually have a productive economy, a productive society. So I agree. We're definitely working on putting out more material. People who are participating in the class series, people who are reading if you're not a subscriber to our executive intelligence review, where you get further insight and details to the work that we're doing and Mr. LaRouche's contributions, then you should be a subscriber, and you should be getting our daily LaRouche emails. So, is there other thoughts, questions, ideas?
So I think also we're looking at getting more young people involved. So are we gonna start mapping out campuses and
Yes.
talk about that?
Yes, the idea of mapping out campuses I know came up at the conference, and I think it's essential right now because especially when you have, as we were talking about, this whole green operation and what they're doing, as people may not know, but one of the things that they're calling for is on March 15th is a day of walkout and basically supporting the environmentalist green agenda. And I mean, this thing, what they're doing in the education system on these campuses is disgusting. And, you know, the fact that you have George Soros operations paying these young people, not just college campuses, but they're trying to get it into the high schools and so forth, to participate in this whole very corrupt operation where they're going with this anti-science, anti-human green agenda. Anyway, so
They got it down to the middle school.
oh yeah, the middle schools too. Yeah. So I think, you know I heard that it's been going on in Germany and Europe for even longer, and now they're bringing it into the United States. And so anyway, but yes, we definitely need to have our presence on these campuses because the thing about it too is there is some clashing going on the campuses too, that we should get a better reading on the intelligence. And this is another thing too. We need a reading coming from our work that we're doing in the field, how people are responding, what the political climate is. We got to get a better understanding of what it is, not just what people are hearing on the news media, but how people are responding to the impact of these policies on their lives. You had something you wanted to
Well,
add?
I was, didn't the Green New Deal get released after our last meeting and before now? In other words, does everybody know? I mean, who's here today about what the Green New Deal involves?
It was released after. You're right.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it'd be useful both for the audience and also for whoever's here, just kind of like a.
Well, I'm not prepared to go through the
Right,
content. Yeah, like I'm not prepared to give a presentation right now on the whole of it.
genocide.
Yeah.
It's been on.
The idea
Every
that they're
news
gonna
media.
ban, every. form of
If
fossil
Brian
fuel,
has some,
yeah.
he's been looking at it. He has some ideas. Go ahead.
I mean, they want to get rid of the combustible engine, for God's sake.
Oh yeah. Well, they want it's the same thing they've been saying. They want the complete elimination of all the carbon emissions, no nuclear power whatsoever. We put out a lot of this material, and what Ocasio-Cortez and group is proposing is even to the farthest extent of extreme beyond what we put out in the global warming is population reduction, not science, because what Shell and Uber and officials representing the order of the British Empire put forth is we go through the direct implications of this green agenda. And somebody, I think, Brian, you sent this out today too, which was interesting, that the labor representative said with this new Green Deal, green agenda, it's going to have a detrimental effect on the development of infrastructure. And this was from labor. And of course, we know about the new infrastructure deal that was just passed not too long ago.
And where's the infrastructure?
Whereas the infrastructure, well, if you get these green people, there's not going to be any infrastructure.
It's done now.
Hold on 1 second. He wants to say something. Go ahead.
Oh, I was the president of the laborers union. one of the major construction unions, said that it'll be virtually impossible to even get a bill passed through Congress to finance infrastructure if this green New Deal is dominating. He just said, you know, it's a point we've made otherwise.
Right.
That this will just shatter any attempt to build a consensus, to organize a recovery, a rebuilding of the U.S. economy, so desperately needed for future generations.
Okay, I'm not being crazy, but are they worried about the economy or the structure of building and advancing in technology and building new things? It's, to me, it always comes down to the dollars and cents, just like it's on that money. I still don't understand why they put that on money. But in God we trust, because that's a bunch of bull.
No, they want to get rid of 98.
Glad I'm back.
I think Joel has something to say.
They want to get rid of 98% of the fuel that we use in 10 years and replace it with windmills and solar panels that don't work.
Yeah.
That means
Internal combustion.
no high-speed trains because you need electricity to run.
Pretty soon they'll.
And that's funny what you just said, because one of the things is, from what I understand, Cortez is saying she's promoting the idea we need high-speed trains, but the
Stop the chemtrails.
but the, like you just said, hold up, like you just said, Joel,
Ask Brian about the trains in China.
how do you do that if you are completely opposed to, you know, you're going to run it on windmills? I mean, that's just the stupidest thing.
But the windmills have been working in some places like Block Island, Rhode Island.
Yeah, but if you put them on the train, you can't go through the
you can't put
tunnels.
them on the they won't go under the track. I mean, the thing, I understand that. But, I mean, we got to make something compromisable. I mean, I just seen this the other day, and I know because I got a breathing thing too. We got to clean up the air and stuff. They got to come to some, agreement.
Yeah, we'll go with
Like,
fusion
get a
power.
tree and die. She had a pole because she had a severe asthma attack.
See,
This
Joanne,
is no
it's a
plan.
phony. It's a phony. If they wanted to clean up the air, they would say nuclear power, because that's the cleanest thing there
Which
is.
they're opposed
But they're
to.
against nuclear power because the theoreticians like Schellenhuber, who were mentioned, this guy in Germany, they say in their plan that the planet can only sustain 1 billion people. And we've got over 7 billion, going on 8 billion now, which means they're talking about genocide for 7 billion people.
Some of these folks need to be knocked off.
Oh, hush your mouth.
I can name a few guys like
Okay.
to get knocked off,
Okay,
but-
so somebody say something positive before we turn this off.
If they were serious about decarbonizing the economy, they would be supporting a crash program for fusion power.
Yeah, that's what they would be doing.
But
Crash
the
program for
fact
fusion
is
power.
that we don't want to decarbonize because the reality is carbon is good because it's creating more green. It's causing we've added the equivalent of a tropical rainforest in the last 20 years based on beginning to industrialize the underdeveloped world. And we're bringing more green onto the planet. So it's
By
an
filling up my shed.
unscientific ideological cult that is, because of the rejection of, what LaRouche has been talking about, the brainwashing of people so that this elite has been able to dictate to societies around the planet.
Well, I think the best way to think about it is in terms of the Integrity Initiative report that Barbara Boyd laid out. It's, to me, it reeks exactly what she described in there: cognitive infiltration, where you sprinkle in some good things with a whole bunch of bad things, and then you create factionalization, you create all this infighting through the internet and whatnot. It's exactly what's happening. So there's some people who were sympathetic to the New Deal, who were pro-nuclear, and then AOC got into an argument with them. And then you have the high-profile Democrats like Feinstein and Markey, who just threw her under the bus, denouncing it as fiscally unfeasible. So all you have is chaos, political chaos. And like what we described before is they frame it in terms of policies. And Dennis Speed brought this up too, in terms of our policies. It's like a direct attack on our policies because they say that it's an Alexander Hamilton orientation. They say that it's a Franklin Roosevelt orientation, and it couldn't be further from what it really is.
Yeah, they try to redefine something that is good and change the meaning of the word.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that when it comes to the strategic defense of the Earth as a whole and of humanity, one fusion-powered spacecraft will do a lot more than any number of windmills or solar panels.
Yep, that's very true.
That may be one thing that we can introduce as a counter-argument. I mean, there's been some more notice in the press lately about near Earth objects, and we can always point to the Chelyabinsk incident and also the Tunguska incident back in the early 20th century, late 19th century, I think it was. You know, I mean, this Earth is under constant bombardment. You know, and we cannot negotiate with these things or we can with our fellow human beings. We have to be able to take a decisive action and have a plan in place, or else it might be game over before you know it.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and I would encourage people because one of the very fundamental things, very important things that of LaRouche's breakthroughs and his work in the institution of the presidency, as many people know from Lynn's history with his breakthrough in the Strategic Defense Initiative, working with President Reagan. One of the things in the third panel that was the basis of Ben Denison's presentation was LaRouche's discovery of the Strategic Defense Initiative as it relates to the strategic defense of Earth. Because, I mean, this is really, as you just said, what we need to be looking at. If you're going to be able to detract the threat of asteroids, near Earth or objects and so forth, you're not going to do it without highest advances in energy flux density, fusion, development. You know, you're not going to send chemical rockets up to try to deflect asteroids that are coming at you. And one of the things that Ben talks about in his presentation is that in the recent period, we've had some very near misses that we're not prepared for at all because people have their priorities in the wrong place. So we got to have a commitment to a real science driver. And I think that's important what you brought up. So again, I'd encourage people to watch the entire conference and definitely watch the third panel to hear that presentation on what the scientific breakthrough that's necessary to be able to address these common threats to mankind as LaRouche understood it. So look, that's good. We gotta definitely have a lot to do and more ideas. I'm interested in hearing what people want to see in terms of things that are coming out that we need to know more on in terms of our publications, including things that people are working on the scientific standpoint or the economics, so forth and so on. Just make sure that you're communicating those things, and you can send them to me, let me know, and we'll be putting out more details on different intelligence activity that we want more people to be getting engaged in. So anything else people are thinking about? If not, make sure again that before you leave, you get the latest material here. And one thing I would propose, just because of what Belinda said, and we can see if we're prepared for this, is I think you have a good point. I want to go on whole presentation, but I think between maybe Joel has been doing some work on this, sort of putting you on the spot now, that you can give a presentation on the contrast between this new Green Deal and what you were just discussing on the need for a fusion driver. So that's my challenge to Joel for the next class, and we can get more people in here and get that built up. All right.
There is the chorus, the Ebony Opry Guild next Saturday. I don't know if that's.
Oh, I thought there was a thing tomorrow, 4:00. No, it's Saturday.
No, it's next Saturday at 4:00.
Oh, it's next Saturday?
Next Saturday, okay, well, we might have to just move our meeting to 1. We'll discuss that later. But okay, we can adjourn.
Oh, yeah, right.
Thanks, everyone.